Right now, as you watch this, the largest financial institutions in America are placing trillion-dollar bets that this country will fail. Not might fail, will fail. In the last 18 months alone, Wall Street's biggest players have moved over $2 trillion in capital positions that only profit when American assets collapse. JP Morgan, Goldman Sachs, BlackRock, Morgan Stanley. They're not just hedging. They're positioning for demolition. And here's what makes this absolutely terrifying. Every single time in recorded financial history that this exact pattern has emerged, the outcome was identical. Complete systemic reset. Every time, without exception. You're about to see something that Wall Street desperately hopes you never understand. A four-stage pattern so consistent, so predictable, so mathematically certain that once you see it, you can't unsee it. And we're currently sitting at stage 3. The point of no return. Let me show you exactly what I mean. There's a sequence that plays out every single time a financial system reaches terminal velocity. 4 stages, always the same, always in the same order, and always with the same ending. Stage 1, foundation and trust building. This is where the system establishes credibility, where institutions become too big to question, where everyone believes the rules are solid and the referees are honest. Money flows in because people believe the game is fair. Stage 2, expansion through leverage and debasement. The system realizes it can create money faster than it creates value. Debt explodes. Asset prices disconnect from reality. Everyone's getting rich on paper, but the foundation is rotting. The people running the system know this, but the music is still playing, so they keep dancing. Stage 3, loss of control and elite repositioning. This is where we are right now. The insiders realize the math doesn't work anymore. They can't admit it publicly because that would trigger the collapse immediately. So instead, they quietly move their money to safety. They bet against the very system they publicly defend. They take short positions on their own country. Stage 4, systematic collapse and reset. The inevitable conclusion, the moment when reality catches up with the lies. When the debt can't be serviced, when the currency loses credibility, when the entire structure implodes and rebuilds on new terms. This pattern has repeated across centuries, across continents, across every type of economic system humans have ever created, and it's playing out right now in America. Let me prove it to you with 3 historical examples that will make your blood run cold. Amsterdam, 1630s. The Dutch Republic controlled global trade like no empire before it. The Dutch East India Company was the most valuable corporation in human history, adjusted for inflation, worth over $7 trillion. Stage 1 complete, foundation built, trust established. Money flooded in from across Europe. Then came the madness. The Dutch discovered tulip bulbs, not just as flowers, but as financial instruments. By 1636, a single tulip bulb cost more than a luxury home in Amsterdam. People were taking out loans against their houses to buy flower contracts. The entire economy became a leveraged bet on tulips. Think about that for a second. An entire empire betting everything on flowers. Sound insane? It was. But here's what matters. The Dutch financial elite knew it was insane. We have records. Private letters from Dutch bankers in 1636. They were selling their tulip positions, quietly, without announcing it, while publicly promoting tulips as the future of wealth. They knew the crash was coming. They positioned for it, while telling everyone else to buy more. Stage 3 confirmed. Elite repositioning while the public stayed all in, February 1637. The tulip market collapsed in a single week. Fortunes evaporated overnight. People who were millionaires on Monday were bankrupt by Friday. The Dutch financial system never recovered its dominance. Within 30 years, Amsterdam lost its position as the world's financial center to London. The golden age was over, permanently. Stage 4 delivered exactly as the pattern predicted. But wait, you're thinking, that was just flowers. That was just Dutch weirdness. That could never happen to a real empire. Let me show you what happened to the greatest empire the world had ever seen. The fall of Britannia London, 1920. The British Empire controlled a quarter of the planet. The pound sterling was the world's reserve currency. Every major trade settlement happened in pounds. Britain's financial system was considered unshakable. The sun never set on the British Empire. Everyone knew that. It was a fact of nature. Stage 1 locked in. Total global dominance. Complete trust in the system. Then Britain made a fatal decision. After World War I, they returned to the gold standard at the pre-war exchange rate. This meant printing massive amounts of currency while pretending each pound was still backed by the same amount of gold. Classic debasement, creating money out of thin air, promising value that didn't exist. By 1925, British debt had exploded to over 180% of GDP. They were borrowing to pay interest on previous borrowing. The death spiral had begun, stage 2 in full effect. The foundation was crumbling, but the facade looked perfect. Here's where it gets interesting. In 1931, British financial institutions began a quiet exodus. Major banks started moving gold reserves to New York. Wealthy families transferred assets to American accounts. The Bank of England's own directors were diversifying out of sterling, all while the government publicly insisted the pound was stronger than ever. We have the transaction records, the cables between London and New York, the private memos between banking executives. The pattern was unmistakable. The insiders were running for the exits, while telling the public to stay calm and carry on. Stage 3 confirmed. The elite knew the empire was finished. September 1931. Britain abandoned the gold standard overnight. The announcement came on a Sunday evening. By Monday morning, the pound had crashed 25%. Within weeks, it lost 40% of its value. The entire Commonwealth financial system collapsed. Countries that had trusted Britain for centuries watched their reserves evaporate. The empire that ruled the world for 200 years lost everything in a matter of months. By 1944, the dollar replaced the pound as the world's reserve currency. Britain never recovered its financial supremacy. Today, the pound is just another currency. The empire is a memory. Stage 4 completed exactly on schedule. But that was nearly a century ago, you're thinking. The world is different now. We have computers. We have data. We have learned from history, have we? Let me show you what happened just 35 years ago in the most technologically advanced economy on Earth. Tokyo, 1985. Japan was unstoppable. Their economy was growing so fast that economists predicted Japan would overtake America by the year 2000. Japanese banks were the largest in the world. Tokyo real estate was the most valuable on Earth. The grounds of the Imperial Palace were theoretically worth more than all of California. Think about that. One palace worth more than the entire state of California. Japanese companies were buying Rockefeller Center, Columbia Pictures, Pebble Beach. American icons were being purchased like souvenirs. The Japanese miracle was real, everyone agreed. It was the future. Stage 1 established perfectly. Total confidence, complete trust, unlimited money flowing in. Then the Bank of Japan made a decision that would destroy a generation. They dropped interest rates to historic lows and flooded the system with cheap credit. Japanese corporations borrowed trillions of yen to buy assets. Stock prices tripled in 4 years. Real estate prices quintupled. A single square meter of Tokyo office space cost $50,000. The entire economy was leveraged 20 to 1 on assets that had no fundamental value justification. None. It was pure speculation backed by debt, backed by nothing. Stage 2 reached terminal velocity by 1989. The machine was screaming. Red lights everywhere. But the party was too good to stop. Here's what happened next. In late 1989, Japan's largest banks and trading houses began selling domestic assets. Quietly, no announcements, no press releases, just systematic liquidation. Internal memos from Nomura Securities show executives liquidating Japanese stock positions while recommending clients buy more. Mitsubishi transferred billions to overseas accounts. The Ministry of Finance's own pension fund reduced Japanese equity exposure by 40%, all while publicly projecting confidence, all while telling the Japanese people that the miracle would continue forever. The pattern was textbook. Stage 3 in motion. The insiders getting out while the public piled in. January 1990, the Nikkei crashed. Lost 60% in 18 months. Real estate collapsed by 70% over the next decade. Japan entered a 30-year economic stagnation they still haven't escaped. An entire generation lost their wealth, their retirement, their future. The Japanese miracle ended permanently. Today, Japan's stock market is barely back to 1989 levels. 35 years of going nowhere. An entire lifetime of lost wealth. Stage 4 delivered precisely as history predicted. 3 examples, 3 different centuries, 3 different continents, 3 different types of economies, identical pattern, identical outcome, every single time. Now here's where it gets personal. Because that same pattern is playing out right now in America, and most people have no idea. America's foundation stage lasted from 1944 to 2000. The Bretton Woods Agreement made the dollar the world's reserve currency. Every country needed dollars to buy oil. Every major trade settlement used dollars. The Federal Reserve became the central bank of planet Earth. American financial institutions grew into the largest in human history. Trust in the system reached absolute levels. Even when Nixon removed the gold backing in 1971, the world kept using dollars. Why? Because America's military, economic, and institutional power made it seem inevitable, made it seem permanent. The foundation was complete. Stage 1 verified. America was the new empire. The dollar was the new pound. The Fed was the new Bank of England. History repeating itself. But nobody noticed. 2000 to 2022. This is where the math started breaking. Where the lies started showing. Where the foundation started cracking. The Federal Reserve's balance sheet in 2000 was $500 billion. That's the amount of money they had created, the amount they had injected into the system. By 2022, it hit $9 trillion, an 1,800% increase in 22 years. Let me say that again, 1,800%. They created 18 times more money than existed at the turn of the century. U.S. national debt in 2000 was $5 trillion. Today, it's $34 trillion, a 580% increase in 23 years. But here's what really matters. The thing that keeps economists awake at night. The thing nobody wants to talk about. The debt is growing faster than the economy. In 2000, U.S. debt was 56% of GDP. Today, it's 124%. We crossed the mathematical point of no return in 2020. The point where you can't grow your way out. The point where you can't inflate your way out without destroying the currency. The point where the interest payments alone consume everything. America now pays over $1 trillion per year just in interest on the debt. Think about that. $1 trillion. Not paying down the debt, just paying interest, just keeping the lights on. That's more than the entire defense budget. More than all spending on education, infrastructure, and science combined. And it's accelerating. By 2030, interest payments will be $2 trillion annually. By 2040, $3 trillion. The numbers become meaningless after a while, but the trajectory is clear. The system is eating itself, consuming its own future to pay for its past. This is classic stage 2 debasement, creating money faster than creating value, borrowing from the future to pay for the present, promising benefits that can't mathematically be delivered. The Dutch did this with tulips. The British did this with war debt. The Japanese did this with real estate. America is doing it with everything. Student loans, housing, healthcare, defense, Social Security, Medicare. All of it funded with money that doesn't exist. All of it promises that can't be kept. Stage 2 confirmed. The debasement is complete. The foundation is rotted through. And now we arrive at the part that should terrify you. 2022 to present. The insiders are moving. Quietly, systematically, ruthlessly. Let me show you what's actually happening behind the headlines, behind the press releases, behind the confident statements from central bankers and treasury secretaries. Jamie Dimon, CEO of JP Morgan Chase, the most powerful banker in America. In public, he says the American economy is resilient, strong, ready for anything. In private, his bank has taken the largest short position against U.S. treasuries in its history, over $400 billion in derivatives, betting that American government bonds will lose value. $400 billion. That's not a hedge. That's not risk management. That's a directional bet. That's Jamie Dimon saying, with his money, not his words, that U.S. government debt is going to collapse. Goldman Sachs. Their public research reports recommend buying American equities. Stay invested. Stay optimistic. America always comes back. Meanwhile, their proprietary trading desk has reduced U.S. equity exposure by 38% since January 2023. Read that again. They're telling you to buy while they're selling. They're recommending stocks to clients while dumping them from their own portfolio. They're doing the opposite of what they're telling you to do. BlackRock, the largest asset manager on earth, $9 trillion under management. More money than most countries will ever see. In 2022 and 2023, they moved over $1.4 trillion in client assets from U.S. dollar holdings into foreign currencies, gold, and offshore instruments. $1.4 trillion. That's the largest capital flight in American financial history. And they did it quietly. No press releases, no public announcements, no headlines, just systematic repositioning while telling retail investors to stay calm and keep buying American. Morgan Stanley. Their internal risk models, leaked in 2023, show they're pricing in a 40% probability of a U.S. sovereign debt crisis by 2030. 40%. Let that sink in. The people with the best data, the best analysts, the best information on earth. They're saying there's a coin flip chance that America defaults on its debt within 6 years, and they're positioning accordingly. Bank of America, Citigroup, Wells Fargo, all of them have reduced their exposure to long-term U.S. government debt. All of them have increased their holdings of hard assets, foreign currencies, and inflation-protected instruments. The pattern is everywhere once you know what to look for, once you understand the playbook, but it gets worse, much worse. The Federal Reserve itself is showing signs of stage 3 behavior. In 2023, the Fed began allowing certain foreign central banks to convert their treasury holdings directly without going through open markets. Why would they do that? Why create a special backdoor for certain countries to sell U.S. debt? Because open market selling would reveal the scale of the exit. It would show how many countries are dumping dollars, how many central banks are losing faith. It would trigger panic, bank runs, currency collapse. So instead, they're creating a quiet exit, a way for insiders to get out without alerting the public, without causing the stampede. This is not speculation. This is not conspiracy theory. This is documented Fed policy. You can read it in their meeting minutes. You can see it in their balance sheet. The ultra-wealthy are moving too. Family offices, the private investment vehicles of billionaires, have shifted asset allocation dramatically since 2022. Exposure to U.S. equities down by an average of 22%. Cash holdings up 67%. Gold and precious metals up 93%. Real estate outside the U.S. up 48%. They're not betting on America anymore. They're betting against it. They're moving their wealth to safety while the music is still playing. And here's the thing that should keep you awake at night. These people have better information than you. They have access to data you'll never see. They have relationships with policymakers, central bankers, treasury officials. They have breakfast with the people who make the decisions. They know what's coming before it hits Bloomberg, before it hits CNBC, before you have any chance to react, and they're running for the exits, while telling you everything is fine, while recommending you stay invested, while promising the American economy is strong. Look at their actions, not their words. Actions reveal truth, words conceal it. Stage 3 confirmed. Elite repositioning complete. The insiders are out. The Dutch bankers sold their tulips while promoting them to everyone else. The British aristocracy moved their gold to New York while defending the pound. The Japanese executives liquidated their positions while telling clients to buy. And now Wall Street is shorting America while telling you to invest in it. The pattern never changes. Only the names and the dates. What comes next? Now, let me tell you what happens in Stage 4, and why it's inevitable, why it can't be stopped, why every attempt to prevent it only makes it worse. The mathematics are brutally simple. America's debt grows by $2 trillion per year. The economy grows by maybe $400 billion in real terms. Real growth, not inflated numbers, not accounting tricks. You can't shrink that gap through growth. The math doesn't work. You'd need 8% GDP growth every year for a decade. That's not happening. That's never happening. You can't tax your way out because the wealthy have already moved their assets. They've hired the best accountants, the best lawyers. They've found every loophole, every offshore account, every tax haven. And even if you could tax them, even if you could confiscate 50% of billionaire wealth, it would barely make a dent. It would fund the government for maybe 6 months. Then what? You can't cut spending because 70% of the budget is mandatory entitlements. Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid. Interest on the debt. That's locked in. You can't touch it without breaking promises to hundreds of millions of people. That leaves exactly one option. The only option that's ever available when a government reaches this point. Devalue the currency, print money to pay the debt, inflate away the obligations, make the debt smaller by making the dollars worthless. This is what every government in Stage 4 has done throughout history. The Dutch did it, the British did it, the Japanese did it, the Romans did it, the Weimar Republic did it. Argentina has done it 6 times. It's not a policy choice, it's mathematical inevitability. When you can't pay your debts, you print money. When you print money, the currency loses value. When the currency loses value, everything denominated in that currency collapses. And when that happens, here's what you'll see. First, the dollar loses purchasing power. Not 2% a year like the Fed targets. Not the mild inflation we've been trained to accept. 10%, 15%, 20% annually. Your savings evaporate. Your salary buys less every month. The grocery bill that was $200 last year is $400 this year, $600 next year. Gas triples in price. Housing becomes unaffordable for anyone not already wealthy. The middle class gets crushed. The poor get destroyed. Only the people who repositioned early survive with their wealth intact. Second, social unrest. When people can't afford food, they get angry. When they realize the system was rigged, when they understand that the insiders knew and got out while leaving everyone else holding the bag, they get dangerous. History shows this always leads to political instability, protests, riots, sometimes revolution. Always chaos, always violence. The social contract breaks down because the economic contract was broken first. Third, a new system emerges. The dollar gets replaced or restructured. Probably through a digital currency, the government controls completely, every transaction monitored, every purchase tracked, financial privacy gone forever. Asset values reset, wealth redistributes, not to the poor, not to the victims, to whoever controls the new system, to whoever writes the new rules. The game doesn't end. The board just gets cleared and the same players start a new round. And here's the thing, almost no one understands. The thing that makes this so urgent, so terrifying, this is not a crisis that's coming. It's a crisis that's already here. The collapse has already started. You just can't see it yet because the media isn't reporting it and the government is hiding it behind manipulated statistics and redefined terms. But the insiders know. That's why they're repositioning. That's why Wall Street is betting against America. That's why the smart money is leaving. They've seen this pattern before in history books, in case studies, in the wreckage of every empire that thought it was different. They know exactly how it ends, and they're making sure they're on the right side when it does. Now let me address the 3 things people always say when they hear this. The 3 comfortable lies that let them go back to sleep, that let them ignore the warning signs until it's too late. Lie number 1, this time is different. No, it's not. It's never different. Every single generation believes their crisis is unique, special, unprecedented. The Dutch thought tulips were different because of new farming techniques that would make them perpetually valuable. The British thought the pound was different because of the empire's military might and global reach. The Japanese thought their economy was different because of cultural superiority and technological dominance. Americans think the dollar is different because of military power, because of the reserve currency status, because America has always been exceptional. It's the same delusion every time, dressed in different clothes, spoken with a different accent, but the same fundamental error. The math always wins. The pattern always completes. History always repeats. Not because people are stupid, but because the incentives are the same. The human nature is the same. The ending is always the same. Line number 2, technology will save us. No, it won't. Technology is deflationary. It makes things cheaper and more efficient. That's wonderful for living standards. That's why your phone is 1,000 times more powerful than phones from 10 years ago at half the price. But that's terrible for paying off debt. Debt is denominated in currency, fixed amounts. You owe a specific number of dollars regardless of what those dollars can buy. Technology makes goods cheaper, but doesn't make your debt smaller. In fact, it makes your debt harder to service because deflation increases the real value of debt. You can't tech your way out of a debt crisis. You can only default or inflate. Those are the only options. Those have always been the only options. Technology doesn't change that fundamental reality. History proves it. Rome had advanced engineering. The British had the Industrial Revolution. Japan had robotics and electronics. None of it saved them when the debt spiral reached terminal velocity. Lie number 3. American exceptionalism means we're immune. This is the most dangerous myth, the most seductive lie, the one that will cost the most people everything. America is exceptional. That's true. Most innovative country in history, most dynamic economy, most powerful military, cultural influence that spans the globe. But America is not immune to mathematics. Being the strongest economy doesn't mean you can't collapse. It just means you have farther to fall. Britain was the strongest economy in 1920, the greatest empire in human history. They collapsed in a decade. Spain was the strongest economy in 1500, the first global superpower. They collapsed within 50 years. Rome was the strongest economy in 200 AD, the eternal city, the empire that would last forever. They collapsed so completely that Europe forgot how to build roads for 1,000 years. Strength doesn't prevent stage 4. It just makes people ignore the warnings until it's too late. It makes the denial deeper, the fall harder, the destruction more complete. American exceptionalism is real, but it doesn't mean the rules don't apply. It doesn't mean the pattern breaks. It just means the consequences will be more devastating because the heights were greater. Here's what's actually true, what's real, what's coming whether you believe it or not. The pattern is absolute. We're in stage 3. Stage 4 is coming. The only questions are timing and severity, not if, when, not whether. How bad? The insiders have already made their move. They've repositioned their wealth. They've hedged their exposure. They've prepared for what's coming. You can see it in their actions, not their words, their actions. What they're doing with their own money when they think nobody's watching. And if you understand the pattern, if you see what they see, if you're willing to act on reality instead of hope, you can do the same. You can't stop stage 4. Nobody can. The mathematics are set. The trajectory is locked in. The debt can't be paid. The promises can't be kept. The system can't be saved. But you can survive it. You can protect your wealth. You can position for the reset instead of becoming a victim of it. The question is whether you'll act on this information or ignore it, whether you'll trust the pattern that's played out dozens of times across centuries, or whether you'll trust the people who are quietly betting against you while telling you everything's fine. History has given us the answer. 300 years of identical outcomes. Every time the pattern appears, stage 4 follows, without exception, without mercy, without warning to those who weren't paying attention. Wall Street is betting against America, not because they're unpatriotic, not because they hate this country, but because they understand the pattern, because they've studied history, because they know the math, and they know exactly what comes next. The Dutch bankers made fortunes while their neighbors lost everything. The British aristocracy preserved their wealth while the empire crumbled. The Japanese executives stayed rich while a generation was destroyed. And the American financial elite will do the same. They're already doing it. Right now, while you watch this video. The only question is whether you'll be on the right side of the trade or the wrong side. Whether you'll see the pattern in time, whether you'll act before it's too late. Because time is running out. Stage 3 doesn't last forever. The quiet repositioning phase ends. The insiders finish their exits. The doors close. And when stage 4 begins, when the collapse becomes visible, when the panic starts, it will be too late to move. Too late to position, too late to protect what you've built. The pattern is complete, the evidence is undeniable, and your decision will determine everything. What happens next is up to you.